This is Mark Mason in the Comics Waiting Room, and I am watching Aaron Campbell put marker to paper right now.
Lobster Johnson.
There he is. We are here at the Phoenix Comicon. Aaron, you are here from Albuquerque today.
Yes, I am.
Did you have a good drive?
It's a really nice drive, actually. Go through some alpine hill country on the way down from Holbrook into Phoenix. Avoided any forest fires that are raging throughout the state right now, so that's always good.
You are kind of in the middle. You have some heat right now because you are drawing the Shadow for Dynamite Entertainment.
Yes, I am.
And you were drawing that with writer Garth Ennis, one of the biggest names on the writing side of comics.
Yep.
How did that come your way?
Well, I was working on, after I finished Green Hornet year one, they moved me over to Dark Shadows, I guess for lack of anything else to put me on at the time. So I worked on that for 3 issues. Meanwhile, Dynamite had gotten the license for the Shadow, and they actually got that license the year before last. I was at Baltimore Comicon last year when I found out that Dynamite got that license, and I was actually deep into Dark Shadows at that time, so I sort of, I was like, oh, that'd be so cool if I could have done that, but timing's not right, and I understand. Well, I guess, lucky for me that they sort of sat with it for a long time without being able to figure out who was going to be put on it, and I guess, from what I understand, it was Garth who, suggested, hey, I remember you sent me some artwork when I was doing Battlefield to look at this guy Aaron Campbell, the guy that was drawing Green Hornet, so how about him? They were like, oh, well, he's doing Dark Shadows, but, I guess we can move him over. So, I guess, from what I understand, it was Garth who suggested me, which was awesome.
So yeah, it has to be a pretty good ego boost at the very least, right?
yeah. The thing that I was on his radar was pretty cool. So they moved me over, and it's funny too because they, Dynamite was slightly withholding, in telling me exactly what was happening. So at first it was like, how fast do you think you can get this story arc on Dark Shadows done? And I was like, well, I think I can get done by now. And they're like, well, hurry up, because we've got something else for you. We want to put you on. And I was like, can I have a hit? And they're like, no, not right now, but it's big. You're gonna like it. And so a couple weeks go by, and I turn in, I think issue 3 or 2 of Dark Shadows. And at that point, I was like, so. Can I get a hint now, maybe, some information of what you want to put me on? And Joe Rybin, my editor, he finally broke down and was like, well, the Shadow. And I was like, I kind of had a feeling, but that's awesome. And we talked a little bit more. We had actually, brought up the idea of me doing a one-shot, that I write myself, when there's some downtime and, some space in the schedule. And so I was like, that's funny because that whole one-shot idea that we were talking about, the idea that I was coming up with was actually for the Shadow. And he was like, oh, well, that's cool, we'll talk about that later, but for now you're going to be doing the one written by Garth Ennis. And I was like, what? So he was like, how's that for? And he said, how's that for the cherry on top? And I was like, cherry on top? That's the whole fucking sundae on top.
So you get your first Garth Ennis script. How did it differ from other scripts that you've read?
Well, I mean, after working on Dark Shadows, which is, very sort of subtle and character-driven, going to to the Shadow, which is bam, in your face, crazy action all over the place. I mean, there's still, a lot of character-driven stuff, but right off the bat, we're at the docks, and it's the Shadow blowing away, over a dozen thugs. I had not experienced that yet. I was like, the action is like pumped way up. So there's some similarities between the Green Hornet and the Shadow, but the storytelling styles are pretty different between Matt Wagner and Garth. And of course Garth, he pumps up that violence, which is something that I haven't had a lot of chance to really play around with. So that was fun.
Well, and as an artist, you've gotten to work with Matt Wagner and Garth Ennis and Matt Sturgis. That's pretty good fortune, I think.
Yeah, it's awesome fortune. People always ask me, like, how did you get into the industry? And I'm like, I'm in terms of like them asking, like, what's your story so you can help me understand how I might get into the industry. And I always say, like, I've been ultra fortunate. I'm not a good person to ask because I already had friends who worked in the industry who introduced me to Nick Ferrucci, and I had once I started working on Sherlock Holmes to begin with, and then I had when I was finishing Sherlock Holmes, I met John Cassaday at Seattle at San Diego, and he's the one who suggested that I do Green Hornet Year 1 to Nick. So I've just had these series of fortunate events that put me. Everybody says don't downplay the quality of your work, which I try not to.
Yeah, it kind of helps to be good.
yeah. He's like, you wouldn't have got, like, John Cassaday wouldn't have suggested you if he didn't think you had the ability. But at the same time, I was really fortunate to run into John Cassaday the night that I ran into him, and because if I hadn't, it might have played out completely differently. So, and I was very fortunate to have one of my really good friends run Top Cow, who introduced me to Nick Ferrucci. So it's all, I just feel really blessed that I've had, all of these, really good opportunities, and it all just seems to fall in line because, and the same thing with the little short 6-pager I did last year for House of Mystery for Vertigo. That all came about because after my wife and I got married, I was still working on Green Hornet Year 1 with Matt, and I mentioned something about us taking a trip to New York for New York Comicon. He was like, hey, I never got you and your wife anything for your wedding, so how would you like me to set you up with a meeting with Shelley Bond at Vertigo at the DC offices? And I'm like, okay. So, I got to go up to the DC offices and get a private tour, and I met Dan Didio and like all these other editors at DC and Vertigo, and it was awesome. Like, who else gets that? Like, it's so rare. So I've been really fortunate. I always knock on wood, and I never take it, for granted, anything. So.
Well, and The Shadow has been a huge hit. It's gone to its second print. The second issue just came out. People are loving it. They're responding to it critically.
Yeah.
You're doing all right, Aaron Campbell.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I keep doing all right.
Thank you for joining us today in the Comics Waiting Room.
Thank you.